prime thing is you have to win.
Ill intent, violence, physicality, pain. Enough is enough.
All right, guys. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome to the first live reaction Just Win podcast of the season, or ever, actually. That's Tashan Reed. That's Vic Tafur. I'm Ted Nguyen. And unfortunately, the podcast curse of us all picking the Raiders to win has followed us into this new stream. We all picked them to win, and they lost this game in a game that was very winnable, that I thought they dominated parts of, but they just couldn't do it. And part of it was that fourth and one that they did not go for. Let's talk about that decision a little bit. What do you guys think?
Set the framing up a little bit better than that. Yeah, give the people some context. But the Raiders were trailing 16-10 in the fourth quarter against the Chargers. They had the ball in Chargers territory. About 7 minutes left. They had 3 timeouts left. Faced a 4th and 1, and they decided to punt the ball. The offense had been struggling to that point, but that's a really conservative decision. It's the first time since 2016 that a team has been in that situation and elected to punt the ball. And obviously they went on to lose. And so hindsight is 2020. But I think even in the moment, everybody knew what was coming next. I mean, obviously the crowd here in SoFi, given how many Raiders fans there are in Los Angeles, they started booing as A.J. Cole started to come on the field. It wasn't anything against A.J. Cole, but they wanted them to go for it, and they didn't. So I thought it was a pretty obvious situation. You should go for it. Obviously they didn't, but what do you guys think?
You want some context? I'll give you context. This is from Bill Barnwell from ESPN. In the last 5 years, 63 out of 64 teams have gone for 4th and 1 at the opponent's 40 to 49-yard line when trailing by a touchdown or less.
The one team
that's bad.
This
is one of the worst decisions you'll see this season.
It's bad. Obviously, you're not playing to win when you do that. You're kind of maybe a little defensive coaching, but I cannot totally not see where he was coming from. They had gotten stuffed twice on 3rd and 1, and also on 4th and 1, and it wasn't close. Like those 3 times, they were not close to getting the first down with 1 yard to go. So I think based on that, I think our defense is pretty good. I can see where he was thinking. I don't agree with it, but I can see where he's coming from as far as the offense only had 10 points in the day, so it's hard to say, if we go for it, we're going to get it. I mean, it was a pretty bad offensive showing. The O-line didn't play well at all today, both run blocking and pass blocking. Minshew had 2 turnovers. Zamir White didn't look great. So, yes, bad decision, but I can see what his thinking was when he made it.
But the problem is you have to trust the offense eventually. You don't trust them in the 4th and 1. You have to trust them if you get the ball back to score a touchdown. So, I'm
not agreeing with you. I agree with you. It was a bad decision, but I'm just saying that they had tried it 3 times before and gotten stuffed. It wasn't close. It wasn't like they got stuffed badly. The O-line did not play well, so I can see what he was thinking. But again, It's not playing to win, which is goes against what they preach, like the ill intent, all that stuff. There's no ill intent to not play. It was kind of backing down a little bit. So I get it. It definitely. There's a reason why it hasn't been done before. It doesn't make sense in terms of stats and analytics, and just in terms of wanting your team to know you have confidence in them. Hey, we can do this. But at that point, he didn't have confidence in the offense, and I can see why he didn't. So, but no excuse. It's a bad decision.
Yeah, they had five situations at that point where they had been in third and 3 or shorter, and they only got it twice. And they went for it on 4th and 1 in the first quarter. They were actually in their own territory, so it was a more risky time when they did it then, and resulted in a turnover on down. So, like Vic said, it hadn't gone well for them at that point, and the offensive line was really struggling in this game. I mean, they really couldn't run the ball efficiently, and they also couldn't pass protect for very long. I think that's part of the reason why Gardner Minshew only I think his average air yards per attempt was 4.5 yards, which is very, very, very short. And I just don't think they trusted the offensive line to whether that was to hold up in the pass game or in the run game. But as Ted said, in that situation, while it was 7 minutes left and they had 3 timeouts, so it's reasonable to think you can get the ball back. You got to go for it at some point, right? And I mean, it's the first game of the season. This offense, while they struggled last year, it's a lot of new pieces, a new quarterback. You got to give them a chance to go out there and prove themselves, and they didn't do it. And you could say it cost them the game.
Yeah, and this was a problem last year too. Like there were situations where Antonio Pierce should have gone for it and he didn't. So, I think I just don't understand the process. Like what is their thinking and philosophy when it comes to fourth down? Because it seems so random. Like they went for it on their own 30-yard line at the beginning of the game, but you don't go for it later in the game. Like there has to be some sort of overlying process. Like you don't have to be like Dan Campbell and go for every fourth down, but like I just want to see a little bit more consistency and like they just have to be more aggressive. I mean, in that situation, I think you got to go for it and just live with the decision.
Well, I think the process last year and this year is that he has a lot more confidence in his defense than he does in his offense. I mean, that's what it comes down to. I think so. I can again. It's you would hope as the offense becomes clicks a little better and gets a little better accustomed to each other and has a little more in sync. They weren't in sync at all today. Maybe in the future he becomes more aggressive, but today, with what he saw today, he went back to last year's kind of conservative philosophy and decided to go with his defense and not be aggressive.
Yeah, and I mean they have Ted asked a couple times last year. Like they have a guy that's head of game management. His name's Matt Sheldon. He's been with the franchise for a while, and AP is able to get to him on a headset in those situations and consult him. And I mean, you could see on the CBS broadcast, up until even when AJ Cole was on the field, you could see AP talking through it, and it seemed like he sort of mouthed, should I go for it? And so it's not like he's just like independently making these decisions, and it's only up to him. He has the final say, of course, but there is a process to it. They just tend to lean on the side of being more conservative. I mean, I think they were around league average last year in terms of the amount of times that they went for it on fourth down. Obviously part of that was with Josh McDaniels being the head coach. So I don't think they're like among like the most conservative teams in the league, but you would like to see them be more aggressive. And especially with this type of team, like the Raiders aren't going to be, like some sort of juggernaut like the Chiefs or something of that nature where they're just, running away with games. Like they're going to have to be aggressive and take chances in order to be a competitive team this season. And so at some point, they're going to have to buy into that philosophy and that mentality. That doesn't mean you go for it on fourth down every single time, obviously, but in situations like that, you would like to see them push the envelope open a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that the strength of their team is supposed to be, throwing the ball to Devontae Adams and also these two tight ends. Heard about, Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer all of training camp, and that's supposed to be the foundation of this team, the 12 personnel. Guys are hard to cover in terms of linebacker or safety. They can block. You can have different looks. And I think we didn't see that for a lot today. I think Luke Getsy in his first game was pretty conservative. There was a stretch there late where they had 5 straight passes to the tight ends. That was actually the only time they got to the red zone the entire game. So I think in the future, he has to look at that. I mean, that was the key to open things up. But there were no shots downfield. The Chargers played too high. They couldn't get past that. I just think they were balling up and they couldn't really gather them. And ideally, they could run the ball to kind of create some pressure. They couldn't run the ball, so the offense was kind of stuck all day. I think that ideally, if you're a Raiders fan, you hope that it gets better as they get more, more reps together and more in sync with Luke Getsy and what he wants to do. But today it wasn't good.
Yeah, and that's definitely going to be a problem. And me and Tashan wrote about this when we wrote about the Raiders' 12 personnel usage, and we talked about it in the podcast. But if the Raiders can't run the ball and they can't get teams to respect their run game, you don't get the advantages you want with 12 personnel. You don't get to match up Bowers with the linebacker, and it just becomes difficult. And it wasn't just the run blocking; it was the pass blocking. I know Gardner Minshew did not play well in this game, but at the same time, he did not have a lot of time. Like that pass rush was on him pretty quick. So, I think Thayer Munford actually held up pretty well. A lot of the pressure I felt came from the left side, and it wasn't all Colton Miller. There were times where there were some stunts that got through, and maybe it's just a rust issue. But the number one thing is the offensive line has to play much better than it did against the Chargers, and the Chargers do have an elite duo of pass rushers when they're healthy, but they have to be much better than they were today.
Yeah, Khalil Mack had a 1.5 sacks, and both came on a bull rush of Colton Miller. I talked to him after the game. He said that was kind of his game plan because Colton had off-season shoulder surgery, so he wanted to kind of be on him all game and really press him and kind of bull rush him and be physical and test that shoulder. So obviously his game plan worked, and he made some big plays. Also had a tip for an interception. So a big day for Khalil Mack, and I think he definitely what he wanted to do against Colton worked out well for him.
Yeah, and this offensive line obviously it isn't at full strength yet. With Jackson Powers Johnson, he was inactive with this game due to illness before the game. So Cody Whitehair is in there at left guard. So you basically have a backup left guard, and then Colt Miller in his first game coming back from off-season shoulder surgery. So it's not that surprising, especially against an elite player like Khalil Mack and even Joey Bosa had a sack in this game, that they had some issues in pass protection, and so maybe that can get better as the season goes on, but. I think Luke Getsy's going to have to get a little bit more creative with their play calling. I think they were pretty stagnant and vanilla in this game, and it really reminded me of their offense last year. I mean, that was sort of the issue was they only threw to the short to intermediate parts of the field and ran the ball, and it just became really predictable to where defense could just sit on what they were doing. They didn't have to worry about them taking deep shots down the field, and they were in hell. And that's basically what we saw in this game. I mean, they only had 10 points. They really couldn't find much success out of that one play where Alexander Madison took that short pass and hurdled a couple guys and ran into the end zone, but it was pretty ugly for him besides that. And I really didn't think Gardner Minshew played poorly in this game. I thought he was all right. Between them not being able to run the ball and the pass protection being what it was, I don't really know how much more I expected out of a player out of his caliber, So I think this game, the offensive struggles is really on the offensive line, and then, some of the decisions that they had between Luke Getsy and Antonio Pierce.
Gardner said on the one turnover, the play where he fumbled the ball and it got returned back and gave him 3 points. He was going to throw it, try to pull it back, and then the ball kind of came loose. It was behind the line of scrimmage, so it was a fumble. So clearly an ugly play, and that led to 3 points. And they gave the Chargers 6 points pretty much. The offense did with that play, and also the 4th and 1 stop. So the defense I thought did okay for the most part. They played pretty well in the first half. Kind of gave up some big runs late that kind of killed them, but I thought defense for the most part. You can see why that's going to be the strength of this team and kind of the foundation of any hope they have going forward.
Yeah, so the rush defense was pretty good throughout, and there's some crazy numbers that came from this game because rushing success-wise is, when you look at rushing success rate as how many successful runs they had or what kind of percentage of successful runs they had. The Chargers only had 29.6% of their runs be successful. That's a very low number, but 129 of their 176 yards came on 4 runs. So that means they had 23 carries for 47 runs. So, I mean, the run defense was pretty good, but the explosives killed them.
That's
part of it.
They
got tired. I think part of it was they got a little tired, and the Chargers, you knew they would. A Jim Harbaugh team, they were just going to keep pounding their head against the wall until something happened, and it happened.
This is before you guys' time, but my guy, Tommy Kelly, who's D tackle, would always say, we want stop, then boom. So that was that. Today was stop, boom, late for the Raiders defense, which you can't have. And again, I think we talked about it when I kind of said it was a must-win game, and I think I was kind of serious. I think it was a must-win game because in watching the game today, I think the Raiders are the more talented team. I really do. I mean, I don't think the Chargers have any playmakers at all on offense. The offensive line's okay, pretty good, but Herbert's obviously a good quarterback, but he's got no one to throw the ball to. There's nothing really to worry about. I mean, other teams all year long is take line of scrimmage and make them try and do something. So I just think that looking back, this is a bad loss. It's going to be hard to bounce back next week because the Ravens are obviously a really good team. That's on the road. So the hope is that you get back, I'm guessing you're going to be 0-2, but you have home games against the Panthers and the Browns. So you can get back to 2-2 and maybe a fresh start at that point. But definitely a rough start after all the optimism in the preseason.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say this is a game they should have won. I mean, the defense was playing really well in the first half, and them being behind and ended up losing this one. It was really on the offense, and we said that I don't know how many times last year, especially towards the beginning of the year, and so it's not necessarily something new, but that doesn't make it feel any better for Raiders fans, I'm sure. I am a little bit concerned about the run defense just because I know a lot of it was on those big plays, but they have some tendencies that allows that shit to happen pretty often. I mean, poor angles, guys coming down from the secondary, poor tackling from guys up front, really at all 3 levels, poor tackling. Even on that McConkey touchdown, I know it was a pass, but not being able to wrap him up before he got into the end zone, and so that's something they got to shore up. I mean, they were bad against the run last year. They weren't good in the preseason. They really struggled in this game. So, especially talk about a team like the Ravens next week with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry on the road. Like, if you can't stop the run, it's going to be an ugly one. And so they're going to have to get better, at least in that area. Like, it can't be what it was in this one. Like, even if the secondary is playing well and the pass rush is active, which I think, both of those elements of the defense were a factor in this game. But the run defense was a weakness, and if that continues to be the case, teams are going to continue to run it down the throat.
Yeah, I think part of the issue, and I'm not going to say that this was a huge reason, was, I mean, they got tired and depth kind of affected them. They, right before the game, Malcolm Kuntz is out. He's on IR. And then Tyree Wilson leaves the game and he can't come back in, and that affects the rotation as well. So you have a lot of guys playing a lot of snaps. I mean, is there any injury updates on those guys?
Malcolm Kuntz, is still to be determined how long he's out for. They placed him on injury reserve, so he's going to miss at least 4 games. It sounds like it's really going to depend on how his rehab process goes for that knee injury in terms of whether he's able to come back this season. As for Tyree Wilson, he got hurt in the first quarter, came back, then ended up having to come out again. And Antonio Pierce didn't have an immediate update for us after the game, so to be determined on him as well. Antonio Pierce talks on Monday, so may get some more insight into the status of Kuntz and Wilson then. But, as you said, I mean, they only had 3 defensive ends who could come into the game at that point, and so they were pretty thin there. But, fatigue and, that injuries in combination with the offense, basically going 3 and out every time, it's easy to see how the defense got tired at the end there.
Yeah, Tyree was wearing a knee brace after the game. I think you're right. It could have been a case where the team got a little tired and kind of worn down. I mean, it was hot. It was 97 degrees at kickoff, and my fat ass was sweating walking down to the locker room afterwards. So it was definitely hot. So I can see where if you're actually doing something and playing a game where you might get a little tired in the fourth quarter. But no excuses. I mean, I think other teams, the Chargers didn't do that. So I think, but still, I mean, the depth definitely is a concern going forward.
That's why another reason you got to go for a fourth. Can't, put it back on the defense, a tired defense at the end of the game.
Yeah.
That's a factor.
Yeah, I mean, they were obviously wearing down at that point. Like, they had given up a bunch of rushing yards, so it wasn't like the most shocking thing in the world that they, went on to lose after that.
And also on Dobbins' 2 big runs, the first one, there were some missed tackles. Like Wilkins and Merrick both got kind of treated pretty poorly in those plays. But the last one, the 61-yarder, I thought it was just Deshaun and I both looked at it. It was really well blocked. It was kind of a case where, okay, that's what the O-line is supposed to do, and it kind of wasn't any mistakes that jumped out or wrong gaps. It was like every guy hit his marker. Dobbins made the move, and he was gone. So that one, I mean, sometimes you got to tip your cap to the other team, and that's what happened there. I think that was a play where executed well by a team that's obviously well coached.
I went back and looked at the play. They just ran an old school ISO play. The Raiders knew they were going to run. They had 8 in the box. They had Max Crosby playing linebacker on that play, actually. And then he blitzed. They got penetration. They got exactly what they want. It looked like every gap was covered. And then sorry.
Hey, you didn't cover that gap. That gap was not covered. The dog came right through it, man.
Yep, opened the door and ran through. But yeah, so J.K. Dobbins, it looked like J.K. Dobbins was stopped. And the ISO does not usually cut back, but he cut back across the grain. And John Jenkins looked like he was in the hole. And John Jenkins was good throughout the game. But Jenkins just couldn't get off the block on Rashawn Slater, and that caused a big cutback lane. And, that's why it was a 61-yarder. It was just a really incredible play by J.K. Dobbins. But, I think if Jenkins just had a little more energy on that play, he would have got off the block because he had his hat in the hole. He just couldn't get off the block.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of run defense is shedding blocks, I mean, that's just part of it. So, we'll see if they're able to improve that moving forward.
Yeah,
last thing, we got to jump into the fight at the end, right?
Yeah, last thing we'll talk about is the fight at the end with Jack Jones and Joshua Palmer. What do you guys think about a possible suspension? Do you think it's going to happen?
I think it's possible. I mean, both those guys got tossed, and they more so because I think they started the fight. They started the whole thing. But if you watch it, a lot of guys got involved. A lot of punches were thrown. So I'm not sure how much the league wants to come down with the hammer, but they definitely could if they wanted to. So I think you talked about the depth issues already on defense. That could be even more of a problem if that happens. But I mean, Pierce mentioned it. Undisciplined kind of can happen. You got your ass kicked. They scored. Let it go. Don't try and become all posture up and start talking shit. And I just think that frustrations came out. Obviously, you can't have that in this level. And Jack Jones has been a kind of a problem with him in the past. His emotions kind of get the best of him. And again, today he's a guy got thrown out. So we'll see what happens with suspensions. But it's a bad look, and there's definitely possible repercussions from it if the league really wants to make a statement.
Yeah, I think the length that it went on and how many people got involved and the punches that were thrown, I wouldn't be shocked if somebody came out of this getting suspended. And sometimes we even see if the league doesn't come down, sometimes teams institute their own sort of discipline in these kind of situations. So it wouldn't surprise me. I think it's justified. I mean, you can't lose your cool in that situation. Undisciplined. The game was decided at that point, so that's not why they lost or anything like that. But you don't want to set that kind of precedent for things moving forward.
Yeah, I thought Crosby was part of the fight. Did he throw a punch?
Yeah, Him, Christian Wilkins,
it's actually an issue.
Some other guys. So there were multiple Raiders that threw punches for sure.
Yeah, on both sides. And Pierce himself said that it won't be tolerated. So I'm not sure, like Deshaun said, maybe he takes some action, maybe Mark Davis does. But clearly, people will look at it, the team and the league overnight, tomorrow morning, and we'll see what happens. But there's already such a small margin of error against the Ravens that any more hits to the depth, this team would definitely be crushing as far as next week goes. But we'll see.
Yeah, I'll just highlight a little bit of a silver lining. I mean, I thought when the Raiders when Gardner had some time, you could see that the Raiders have a lot of weapons, and they could get this passing game going. Devontae got open. We saw Bowers flash. Jacoby Myers, and when you get Zamir White into the open field, he's a load to bring down. So this offensive line has to gel together. I think Miller will get better as he gets healthier. We'll see what JPJ could bring as a guard, but we kind of talked about it. This kind of scheme takes some time to learn. You have to really get really good with your communication. So we'll see what happens.
And just breaking it down by halves, I mean, they ran the ball 11 times for 22 yards in the first half, 11 for 47 in the second half. So there's some progress there. And again, if you're this team looking to build off of stuff, that's something you kind of look at and say, okay, well, this is what we did better second half. And I think the talent's there that the scheme should work in terms of the offensive line and the zone scheme. I think Zamir White, those first 3 carries we got stuffed, they really weren't his fault. I mean, he had nowhere to go. I mean, I don't know what he could have gotten in those jetpacks and kind of flown over the pile, but I'm not sure what else he could have done. So, so you definitely can build off that running game as far as it getting better as the game went on.
Oh, and on that first 4th down, Colton Miller didn't get off the ball. He was late off the ball when everybody else got off the ball. I don't know what's up with that, but again, I think those kind of issues get ironed out as the season goes along. That's it. I don't think we'll take any more questions from here. We will be back on Thursday. We might have a guest, but if not, we'll preview the Ravens game. Thanks for joining our first live podcast, and we'll catch you guys on Thursday.
All right. Hasta la vista.
Later, guys.